Welcome to the Edgar Allan Poe podcast with your co-hosts Vicky Ray, Nez, and Keith Chowgo. Exploring book to screen and everything in between, delving into the dark despair and the sinister world of Edgar Allan Poe.
Hello, welcome to Literary License Podcast, and today we're doing Edgar Allan Poe in our month of the Spirit of Love, which will be dealing with obsessive love disorder, and our films will be dealing with this. In our obsessive love disorder, we will be covering a variety of films that will be dealing with this obsessive love disorder. And our first one, of course, is Edgar Allan Poe's Ligeia by Edgar Allan Poe, and the film version by Roger Corman and Vincent Price, The Tomb of Ligeia from 1964. And before we go any further, let's find out who's with us. So today we have Rod Labies with us. Hello, Rod.
Hey, how are you?
Hey, I'm fine. Happy New Year.
Oh, that's right. It is a new year, isn't it?
The Roaring Twenties are back.
Yeah.
Oh, isn't that funny? 100 years ago was the era of the flapper.
Yep.
Not to mention the Great Depression. So.
Well,
Prohibition. Don't forget Prohibition.
I know. Well, we still have.
Oh, that's right. That happened too, didn't it?
Mm-mm.
Yeah. Well,
Elliot Ness, Al Capone.
2020 will be the the year of the slapper. So let's say. And of course, Vicky Ray's with us. Hello, Vicky.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
And before we get started, let's find out what we've been up to. So, Vicky, what have you been up to since last time we spoke to you?
Me? I've just been doing my thing, doing the racing thing with my grandson, and started watching a few series on Netflix and Amazon. One of them, I cannot remember the whole name of it, but I was telling you the last podcast, it was with Ian Somerhalder. It was it's not V, it's something else.
It's V something or other. It's
V something or other, but yeah, it looks like a really good series, so I'm going to keep to watching that. Like I said, I started watching Grey's Anatomy. I'm so ashamed.
And how was your Christmas?
Huh?
How was your Christmas?
Uneventful. Uneventful.
Seems like it never even happened.
I know. I know. It just flew by. It just flew by. What have you been up to, Rod?
Well, I'm in the tail end of a move that I started on actually Halloween night. I drove from New Hampshire to Maine with my 5 cats in the car with me. And it was raining out, and by the time I got here, it was dark, and I had to go into this big, spooky old house and start living there, which is my parents' old house, and it's in disrepair, but not that badly, not as bad as I thought it was, to be honest with you. And I've been doing that ever since. So it was an eventful Christmas season, and then I got to see a lot of people I haven't seen for a long time because I moved back to this area.
I love the old houses up that way. God, they're so cool.
Is your area all decorated
this house is over 100 years old. It was built in 1913, and the really odd thing about it is in all that time, only 2 people have owned it. Really? Only 2 families have owned it. The original owners, and he died here when he was in 1968 from 1913. I don't know how many years that is, 50-something years or whatever. And then we moved in here later on that year and have lived here ever since. So we're almost beating him, but actually we're nowhere near where he was as far as how long we've lived here. But I like the house. It's a beautiful old house. It needs repair, though. It needs a new roof. So that'll be the big thing in the spring.
You'll be there, and you'll beat the 55-year mark in 4 years. So.
Yeah, that's right. Let's hope I don't die like he did. That wouldn't be fun. Of course, he never knew what hit him, so.
Oh. Did he die in the house?
I don't actually know if he died in the house. I know he died on the property. I remember hearing a story that he was dumping his garbage, and that's when it hit him. And he was out in the lawn or something like that. But I don't know if that was ever true. My parents didn't know for a fact. They just like, making stuff up like that.
The ghost hunter and me would go look for records.
Well, what's quite funny is that I bought a house, and when I had my house in Chinatown, the guy who owned it before us, he raised his family there, and he died in the house. And he was quite lonely because his wife died, and I don't think his children visited him, but he had a dog. And the dog went everywhere with him, and the whole neighborhood knew about him and his dog, so he'd take the dog for a walk. And he kind of kept to himself. But when he died, the day that he died, his dog died with him on the same day.
No kidding.
Oh, my.
Yeah, so I thought, that's quite sweet. Kind of sad and depressing, but still sweet.
Well, are you going to die with me, Keith? Are you going to go out the same day I am? Are we going to go do this together?
Why? Because you're my bitch.
The insult trading on social media has been getting really crazy.
Yeah. It's quite funny though. I enjoy your little tirades on social media.
Yeah.
And if anybody wants to do that, you can look for us underneath our real names. We don't put any of this stuff on our Literary License Podcast group page or our fan page.
No,
I don't blame you.
If you want to see us insult each other and at great expense of each other's anything.
Just follow us by our real names. And Vicki and I are not choosy who our friends are. So
I did want to mention about writing assignments that I have. I have a big article that will be coming out probably in February at Scary Monsters, and that's an interview with Roger Davis of Dark Shadows, and I'm sure you're familiar with him.
Yeah.
And then in, I think it will be April, I've already finished the article as far as the first draft is concerned. It's called I Survived the Night in House on Haunted Hill. Where's my lousy $10,000? If you watch that movie, you know that you have to survive a night in that house in order to win $10,000. And I did survive it, and I won it.
There's not enough money to stay in that house. It's like
not by today's standards, but maybe it was even by today's standards. That could buy a lot of stuff.
Like Fear Factor. There is not enough. $50,000 is just not enough to make me drink a maggot milkshake. Why those people did Fear Factor, I don't know. I think people
says the woman who has no memory of what her youth is and what she was drinking during her youth.
Well, it was not horse semen, I can guarantee you.
Oh God.
Well, with myself, I went to Spain for over the Christmas break, and I was in Barcelona, Bilbao, and our house in Espinosa, which we had a really good time with family and friends. So I'm back here doing the Viva La Voca, whatever it's called. Living my life or whatever the hell that means. So, but yeah, we're back to normality. So, any New Year's resolutions from either of you two?
No.
Any resolution?
Yeah, New
I
Year's.
guess my resolution is to.
I don't know, new year, new you. It's a fuck that
I am
shit.
always trying to make myself better in some form, some place where I'm lacking. I think I don't want to procrastinate. That seems to be my biggest thing that draws me down is procrastination.
God, yeah.
I used to teach college writing courses, and I would tell people, do not procrastinate. Don't work on this paper the night before it's due. That's the worst thing you can do. And the thing is, I did the same thing. I mean, I was speaking from experience. It is the worst thing you can do, but sometimes you work better under pressure. I will admit that.
I wrote some of my best A+ papers under pressure.
Yeah, but it wasn't fun.
I'm the other side of the spectrum. As soon as I would get an assignment, or even if I get commissioned to write stuff that I do now, I whip it out within that week. It's like, it's done.
Well, that's how you're supposed to do it. I admire you, actually, for doing that.
Well, I do it because I know that if I waited, I'd just forget that I had to do it. That's my problem. If I don't do everything right then and there, I know that I just never do it. So
yeah, I'm kind of like that too. And I never write down things. Like if I make an appointment, I say, well, I will write that down, and I always forget it. So then I have to go back, and I did the same thing with these podcasts. I had to go back and find the number and the time and all that stuff.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. As far as my my resolutions are concerned, I don't have any. I don't make any because I just don't stick to them. So what's the sense? And I'm not one of these that every New Year go, oh, this year's gonna be better than every other. I'm not one of these people go, this year let's be just as sucky as the year before, and I just keep going.
I know. My resolution is not to have any expectations. That way, I will not be defeatist, or I won't be disappointed.
I'm a half empty kind of guy, not a half full kind of guy.
So you're a pessimist.
Oh yes. Well, no, I like the word realist.
Yeah, I think
I like that word better.
I'm a realist.
We're all.
I guess I'm a realist as well, but I keep looking for the magic. There's got to be magic somewhere.
Well, I find yeah, carry on. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, if I can't find it, I will try to create it by writing about it.
I'm the kind of person just expects the worst, so that way I'm mostly pleasantly surprised. So, see.
Oh, that's a good way to be. Expect the worst and then be surprised if it turns out well. Like with my book, I told you that I had submitted a book to Flaming Press. And it's been a while, and it's been since August, actually. No, was it September? I think it may have been the beginning of September, which, according to what I've read, is not enough time for them to have made a decision. But I feel pretty optimistic about it, even considering all the stuff that you and I had talked about, about it. And I'm thinking of using my real name just the same, rather than a more generic Anglo name that is easily pronounceable. You see?
I think Labby is a good name.
Well, it's actually Labby. You keep mispronouncing.
Oh, well. No matter.
That's what I'm talking about.
Potato. No matter. I still know it's a potato.
Potato, tomato. Let's call the whole thing off.
So how are we pronouncing your last name now? Labby.
Labby. It's just like a lab with a B on it. That's all it is. Labby.
Labby. And I normally call you Labby.
Labby. I've been called all kinds of names.
Labia.
Yeah, that one especially. That one I have been called many, many times, labia. Even by people who do it without realizing what they're doing. Is Rodney Labia here? Oh, I'm sorry. Sometimes I don't correct them.
Let it roll.
Yeah, I just let it roll. So I'm thinking of going by, like you said, a brand name is a brand name, and I've written all these articles under my real name. Why shouldn't I write my novels under my real name as well? And take, do it as my gut tells me. So I'm thinking of doing that, even though I'm going to get some blowback from it. People are going to say, "Oh, you're a misogynist and you're this." We knew
everybody's a misogynist now. I wouldn't worry about it.
No.
I don't know. They really raked me over the coals, these people. That's a story you don't know about, Vicky, but they really did.
Fuck 'em.
I'll tell you it when we're not on the air.
I got people in their feelings did that. That's one thing. I just don't care anymore. I have no
don't
filters
worry.
anymore.
Don't worry, Rod. You got Vicky and I to fight your battles, and I'm
I'm
very good at fighting battles. I know how to shut people up on social media. I do a very good job of it. So they don't know what to make of me.
No, they don't.
Really well. So we're there in your corner.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Finish it.
Thank you.
So I guess that brings us to Ligeia, Edgar Allan Poe, which is an early short story by American writer Edgar Allan Poe, which was first published in 1838. The story follows an unnamed narrator with his wife Ligeia, a beautiful and intelligent raven-haired woman. She falls ill, composes the conqueror worm, and quotes lines attributed to Joseph Glanville, which suggests that life is sustainable only through willpower. Shortly before dying, after her death, the narrator marries the Lady Rowena. Rowena becomes ill and she dies as well. The distraught narrator stays with her body overnight and watches as Rowena slowly comes back from the dead, though she has transformed into Ligeia. The story may be the narrator's opium-induced hallucinations, and there is debate whether the story was a satire. After the story's first publication in the American Museum, it was heavily revised and reprinted throughout Poe's life. So, Vicky, what are your thoughts about Ligeia?
Oh, it's a creepy story. I wonder if he was on drugs when he wrote it,
Well, okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, Hen.
Well, I mean, he does say that he's been under, taking opium. At least the narrator says that.
Yeah, true.
Do you think that she came back through a supernatural thing, or was this his imagination after he poisoned Lady Tremaine or whatever her name is?
I just think it's vintage Poe. He always tries to let you make up your own mind. You really don't get any closure with his stories because you just never know. I mean, like we just did a story a little while back, a podcast about him, and Telltale. And he doesn't really, he kind of throws you in his stories like with no beginning and no end, kind of, sort of. They're just like in the middle of something. They just land like right in the middle and they start it off.
I kind of also look at the simple fact that if you have this obsessive love for somebody and that person dies and then you remarry, it's almost like that obsessive love that you have for someone else is going to carry into the next marriage.
I wouldn't want to be married to somebody who has a ghost around because that's not a marriage. That's a setup for failure. When people they're still in love with their dead spouse, it's like fuck it.
We experienced that last year when we did Alfred Hitchcock's Rebecca, didn't we?
Yeah.
There was that was the whole thing about
Jimmy Stewart was messed up. He was really annoying too. That was an annoying performance.
No, you're talking about Laurence Olivier. He was in Rebecca.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, you're talking about Laurence Olivier.
I was thinking of Vertigo. I was thinking of Jimmy Stewart and Vertigo.
Yeah. He had the same kind of a session, didn't he, in Vertigo as well, that this narrator has in this story. And so sometimes I wonder, is because maybe his love was so strong with Ligeia, and then there was always, with the death of Ligeia, there is this guilt that he has about her dying, that somehow he could have saved her. He should have been the hero.
Well, didn't she have consumption, or she had one of those horrible 1800s?
Yeah, but but at the same time this is written, this is after the death of his wife at the same time, who's totally devoted to him.
Right.
Who basically said that, if you know a little bit about Poe, what happened was that Poe developed this relationship with this other female author. And there was this other female author who was really, really bitchy and started selling stories about they were having this affair and stuff like this. Even though there's nothing proven that there was an affair, it was more like letters back and forth. That's all there was.
It was kind of like Facebook, but only with letters.
Yeah, basically it was like Facebook. And what happened is that it divided up Baltimore severely within the literary crowd. And it caused so much anguish within Poe's wife about all these gossip, and he knew that nothing went on, but because the way everything was being played out within the press, and it was everything was in the newspaper at this time, and Poe said that this didn't happen, this happened. This woman was, this woman was just jealous of these two people because she was one of these authors that really was writing about women's rights and all this other stuff, but at the same time, no one was buying her stuff, where Poe was quite, the literary little prince. And then we have this other, I forgot the name of the other author at the moment, and she was kind of up and coming, and they were very in the social plan sort of thing. But it is contributed that when this whole story came out, though Poe's wife was dying, that this actually made her get even more and more unwell. So maybe what we have here, and knowing that this probably quickened her death through because of Poe's actions, or maybe Poe should have played things a bit differently. Maybe this is Poe's way to work out the anguish. So therefore, if you look at Ligeia as his first wife, Poe's first, and then the guilt behind her death and not being able to save something and not being able to do something, and then remarrying to help right that wrong, which doesn't help right that wrong, because Rowena all the way through is pretty much, she's ghosted by this, that she's never going to have the love of the narrator that he had for his first wife, Ligeia, which eventually when she dies, then I think that the narrator basically just assumes that, Ligeia's come back to him in the form of this, because that way he can actually say goodbye to her properly, maybe. And that's how I interpreted the story.
Well, I kind of interpreted it that way, but except that when he said, after his second wife died, which didn't seem to be any reason for her dying, that she would come down with these illnesses. I can only assume that living in a drafty abbey might, somehow contribute to someone's death if they have respiratory problems or whatever. But she just suddenly, inexplicably becomes ill. And then at one point he says she took a drink of something, and he could swear that he saw 3 droplets of a red ruby liquid go into the drink, and as soon as she drank it, she had an adverse reaction to it, and it killed her.
Hmm.
Do you remember that? It killed her. She died.
Yeah. So maybe she committed suicide.
Well, I wonder if he didn't do it.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah,
well, I mean,
he seems...
She wasn't a nice person, Ligeia. She wasn't warm and fuzzy, was she?
No.
She wasn't a 1950s housewife, was she?
Well, she was a witchy, kind of scary, ethereal, mystical kind of human.
I did get that, but I didn't get that she was witchy, that she just was an unusual, he liked looking at her, studying her. He went through several passages where he's talking about her forehead and then her eyes and then her hair and her mouth. He's like looking at her, he's fascinated by her. This other lady, the blondish, blue-eyed woman, didn't get that same kind of treatment, if you notice. I mean, he just says she's blonde-haired and blue eyes.
And we all know about blonde hair and blue eyes. They're boring, aren't they? He basically traded in Morticia Addams for Barbie.
Basically.
So. But I have to sit there and say, when I was reading Ligeia and I was going through the interpretation of her and the way he's writing about her, I did think of Morticia Addams, the way that she looked, the pale skin, the dark black hair, the voluptuous body, the way that she sets shade across the room.
Right.
All I can think of is Morticia Addams, That's
yeah, exactly.
And the very gothy look. I mean, Ligeia is like the epitome of the goth woman, isn't she? So.
Well, she seemed to be kind of obsessed with death, but I don't think she really wanted to die. She seemed to be afraid, especially the part about the worm. She seemed to be very afraid of that. And then when it came, it just came. It didn't say again how she died or if he killed her. I mean, he seemed to be very distraught upon her death, but does it say what killed her, or does she just come down with a mystery malady?
But then at the same time, the narrator is an opium addict at the same time as well. So
right.
So he's an unreliable narrator, and so basically, you got this guilt, you got this longing, the thing that he wants to possess her, but he can't really possess her because you can't really possess a person. He's obsessed with her to the point where his obsession almost grows to what you were saying before, almost to a slight hatred at the same time. Because I guess if you obsessed over someone so much and you obsess over your love for someone so much, it does get tied in and intertwined with a little bit of hate. Because if you can't possess someone like the way you want to possess them, you get resentful. So
he got into a feud with Rufus Griswold. I guess he's the one that maligned him because Poe gave him a scathing review.
I mean, well, yeah, but I mean, I think when it came to Poe anyway, because Poe became more and more popular, and as I think that once you become more and more popular, then the tigers are out to get you, aren't they? It's like,
right.
It's a bit, well, I guess, I mean, let's take it in modern world. Let's take Tarantino, for instance.
Yeah.
So when Tarantino first came out, we got Reservoir Dogs. Oh my God, you're the most fantastic thing in the world. Pulp Fiction came up, you're the most fantastic thing in the world. And of course, he's selling huge amounts of tickets, and this is becoming like one of the best directors to look out for. Then every film after that, now all of a sudden we get people that start turning against him. The same people that he was the prince of the new cinema now turn against him because he's becoming more and more popular. And then, and I guess living in England where the press do this, they build people up to tear them back down. And I imagine that's probably what was going on with Poe at the moment because the more and more popular you become and the more that you become a household name, the more and more that the press and media and people with power are going to try to tear you down because you're now at a point where they're never going to reach. So I guess.
We all know it's like media really has turned into a 3-ring circus these days.
Hmm.
So, I mean, back then that was probably their version of it because they had little newspapers and they would write about each other and.
Right. I mean, the press was very powerful in those days too.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's how everyone got the news. And you got to remember at the press at that time, you didn't have television shows like Entertainment Tonight or Breakfast Television, whatever like that. So they were printing facts then along with the gossip columns as well. All that was going on side by side in the papers as well. And it was all about the socialites and what the socialites doing. And because of course you didn't have Hollywood or anything like that this time. So they basically would use the socialites as their Hollywood starlets and come out with their stories to keep selling their papers.
Right.
And to be honest, modern day man who was probably reading the Baltimore Tribune or whatever it's called, probably was reading more of that stuff than actually reading what was actually going on in the news.
It was going on in Boston too. So he had a couple big cities on the northeast side that was.
Oh, let's figure out what the Watsons are doing. Oh my God, the Watsons. Oh my God, they got so much money. What a bunch! Oh my God, they're heathens. You know, I would love to have their money, but there's no way I'm going to lead that life. Oh my God, you know, but it probably was like that, wasn't it? So
probably.
I mean, what's also quite interesting about Ligeia, we have some major themes that play through Ligeia that become synonymous with Poe. We have the death of a beautiful woman, which will, that if you are a fan of Poe, you realize that comes through in Bernice, the fall of the House of Ushers, which we'll be covering on later this year, and Morella. We have Resurrection, which is fall of the House of Ushers again, Morella.
Right.
And then, of course, Substance Abuse, which is in the Black Cat and Hot Frog. So Poe does have a habit of using, certain major themes, and he does breathe these through his stories. And we also have the unreliable narrator again, and the first-person narrative.
Right.
Ligeia did remind me of a lot of, Ligeia was like Pit and the Pendulum. It wasn't as easy read as, let's say, Telltale or Mask of the Red Death. I found it a little bit, or Hot Frog.
I think when they do that poem, The Worm, it might lose the reader a little bit.
It did have all those Gothic flourishes where there's a little bit of overwriting going on here, and you kind of wish that someone went with a red pen and go, okay, Poe, we can cut this back a little bit. Yeah. She has long hair. She's voluptuous. Yeah, she's got red eyes. Yeah, she has a high forehead. Yeah, we know this. We don't have to go on about it. Kind of like that. So.
Well, he was upset. See, this is what I don't understand. Maybe you can fill in the blanks for me. He was greatly disturbed by her death. That's very clear. I mean, he became an opium addict, and he just couldn't cope with the idea that she was gone from his life. I assume he fell into a horrible depression and everything. So where did this other woman come from? When did he suddenly start going out with her to the point where he was married to her?
Well,
it seems to be very quick.
Well, that's where we tend to have the unreliable narrator, and this is what Poe does to us time and time again. He drops it. It's like we got two stories going on here. First of all, we get dropped in the middle of the Ligeia story. No beginning of how they met, or there's not a lot of storyline about what their life is like, sort of thing. We're kind of dropped in the middle of their life. She dies, and now we're dropped into another marriage. It's like, okay, well, when did this happen?
I think when he bought the Abbey. That's when he brought.
She came with it like some old furniture.
Yeah.
Hey, we're gonna sell you the Abbey, and look, for this down low price, we're gonna give you Rowena. Yay!
You see, he doesn't talk about the courtship. He doesn't talk about the courtship or anything. I mean, even if he is attracted to her, he never says that. When she dies, he doesn't see. Does he seem to be quite worked up when she dies? I don't get the impression that he really cares one way or the other. She's dead, except that she's a vessel.
But maybe if we put this in I'm not saying that this is right, but maybe if we put it into the 1838 time frame, what was the thing if someone died, if your spouse died, didn't they try to marry you off as soon as possible so that way you wouldn't be lonely, so that way you got someone to take care of you? Did that happen?
They like to keep the money in the family too back then.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean,
I suppose that sounds like
a cousin, didn't he?
That sounds legit. But I got the impression from reading this that he was an independent man, although not really independent. Doesn't he say that he got all his riches from her?
Yeah.
All his riches came from Ligeia because she seemed
so she left him well off.
But Ligeia was quite interesting. You had the dark light. This is kind of like the Archies, with Betty and Veronica. So he marries Veronica. Who's like the smart one, the intelligent one, and then he moves on to a Betty, who's kind of like the airheady one, because Rowena is not as intelligent as Ligeia. She's pretty, but in a blonde sort of way. But she's not. But she doesn't have all the riches that Ligeia has in personality or money. It seems like. So it's almost like he married down.
So it does look like he married down.
So when she died, when Rowena died, she transformed into Ligeia, you think that was just like a serious acid trip, or was the supernatural actually going on?
But I think that maybe I'm reading too much into it, but the interpretation I got that when he married Rowena and when Rowena died, it's almost like it's like having a beloved pet with Ligeia. Ligeia is like your beloved pet, and then when your pet dies, you kind of replace them. And it's like, and that pet never really, even though, you gone from Lassie and now you got Lassie 2, but Lassie 2 never really lives up to Lassie 1. So when Lassie 2 dies, it's like, you kind of wish it was Lassie 1 with you all over again. And I kind of assumed that with Rowena, when Rowena died, he just like, oh, it's really sad that she died, but, she'll never be Ligeia.
Right.
And that's why I thought that if he's, when she died, I thought that, when Ligeia came back, it was more because of his opium fantasy, wishing that Rowena was Ligeia, and he was just losing Ligeia over again because he didn't really, and that he would have felt more losing Ligeia more again than he didn't really feel anything about Rowena. He felt bad that she was dying, but he wasn't distraught that she was dying. So with Rowena dying and bringing her back as Ligeia, therefore he could feel the distraughtness that he had when Ligeia died, and probably be a bit more focused with that, because I think when Ligeia died, that was unexpected, and so therefore he's kind of like he's in a fugue when Ligeia died, and then he marries Rowena. So when Rowena dies, he can process that. So therefore now he can mourn Ligeia because now he can experience her whole death in its whole true form.
Yeah, but I got the impression Ligeia was coming back to life, so he's not really mourning her death if she's being resurrected.
Right.
She used the vessel of Rowena because he says he hears a soft sound coming from the bed. And he went over to look, and he noticed that there seemed to be a rosiness to the cheeks. Then as he watched, it went away. It's like the more that when he first looks at her, each time when he goes to look at her, she has shown some sign of life that quickly deteriorates into death. I don't know if you remember that, but he does say that. He says, I looked at her, and all of a sudden the face took on the look of someone dead. The mouth was all pinched up, and it was really kind of horrifying the way he described it. But then he'd go away, and he'd hear like a sound, like a sigh, and he'd go and look, and she was coming, getting a lividity to her cheeks again, and her teeth. He could see her teeth, and her teeth were nice and beautiful, and then all of a sudden toward the end, it was like she back then, Then all of a sudden she just burst through the shell of Rowena, and she's Ligeia, and he doesn't say, oh my God, what's happening? Instead, he's sitting there watching all this, just sitting there stone still and watching all this happen. I wonder if it's just his mind. I wonder if he was thinking, what I walked away with from that was that he had poisoned her. He had poisoned her and wanted Ligeia to come back through her. She really didn't, but it was all in his opium-fueled reverie that she did.
Yeah, that's how I looked at it as well. It seemed like one bad acid trip for me.
Yeah, like one bad acid trip, because he says I should notify the servants, but they're in another part of the abbey. Isn't that what he says at one point? Yeah. I can't get a hold of them. That doesn't make any sense. They're servants. They should be accessible, not that you can't get a hold of them.
Well, it also says in the research that there was some debate that Poe might have intended Ligeia to be a satire for Gothic fiction. Apparently, that year that Ligeia was published, he published two other pieces called Ciope, a Fable, and the Psyche of Zenobia, Gothic-styled satire. So maybe he was going for satire with this as well.
Or maybe
it could be, because there's just so much you can do.
Or maybe he thought that because of the way his wife died, therefore it's like, screw you people. I'm going to give you a story that everyone can sit there and think it has something to do with me personally. Because it does fall into what was going on in his life at the moment. So maybe he was satirizing his own life in a way people thought that. Because, let's face it, Poe is quite a depressing person. Seems like in life and in the way he's writing. So
I'm sure he wasn't the life of the party by any measure.
But maybe he was satirizing his own life. Like, here you go. I'll give you, this is what you think of me. This is, okay, fine. I'm going to give you a satirization of my life of what you think my life is like. And this is how I am obsessive, because all his stories is about obsession anyway, most of them.
Right.
So maybe, but yeah, I mean, you know, but this is where it's kind of funny, but where Poe's strengths are lies, also lies his weaknesses. And what we have is we do have another abrupt ending. Like we did with last month with Telltale, and we'd had the same abrupt ending in The Pit and the Pendulum, and we had the same abrupt ending.
He just drops you.
The Mask of the Red Dress. So we got this abrupt ending. So it's like, okay, well, what in the hell does this mean, sort of thing. So, you know, was it, you know, maybe he wakes up from his, you know, opium madness, and, you know, Rowena is dead, and that's just it. Maybe there is.
It could be, although I think there was a section of it toward the end after she was starting to come to life that reminded me very much of Mask of the Red Death, where the Red Death had dominion over all, and the clock suddenly slowly went out, and all the lights slowly went out. You know, that's kind of, I think there was a mention of that, something similar to that toward the end of that story. You know, I don't have the book in front of me, but.
No, I do agree with you. And I have to sit there and say that what's quite interesting about the story as a whole, it is written in like a dreamlike stance. It's almost like you're entering this person's dreams. Just the way it's written is all kind of, you know, like when sometimes you would watch these old films from the 60s and 70s, and then they would have like this dream sequence where everything is kind of flowing, and there'd be like the Vaseline around the edges, and everyone's kind of moving in slow motion.
Chew on a Guillotine does that.
Yeah, but this is what Ligeia reminded me of. It's almost like everything's like in this kind of foggy stance, and everything's moving in slow motion, and you know, because nothing moves very quickly in this story. No. It's kind of like like everything's done like in a dream stance as well. So
I wonder how long it took him to write a thing like that. Does he just sit down and just
smoke
write it off
and start banging them out?
Well, he seemed to just knock these stories out one after another. I mean,
he had to get them out. He had deadlines for his papers and the magazines that, you know.
Well, they didn't pay him much. I mean, he got $10 for this one. You know, I don't know how much his rent and everything was. You know, and then again, you know, when they republished these, I mean, I don't know, is it like Peggy Lee and Lady and the Tramp? Did they get residuals when they put them in other volumes? Who knows?
Right.
You know, so, you know, and to be honest, he didn't seem like, he died penniless, so obviously
he wasn't rich.
You know, he wasn't getting a lot of residuals when they would reprint this stuff. I'm assuming. So I don't know how that worked. You know, another thing is that, you know, if you gave your story to American Museum like you did with this story, they gave you $10. Does that mean they own the story? Because we're seeing that now. It sounds
like they own the rights now. Yeah.
Well, we're getting this now that there's apparently a bunch of publishers that authors are complaining about currently in the horror fiction thing, because I still keep in contact with a lot of our horror writers, and apparently that they gave stories to these anthologies, and now they can't get them back because the companies have gone under, but they won't give them the story rights back.
That's not right.
Where when we had our literary agency, what we used to do is like, okay, give us the short stories, but they are yours. They are always going to belong to you. They're never going to belong to us. And we sign contracts with all our authors to make sure that we never owned the rights to these.
Right.
But so maybe back in that time, this is what was going on as well.
I bet you it was.
So
illegal line drawn.
You know, I don't know if he went on book tour. I mean, nowadays there's a lot of ways you can make money from books, you know, sort of thing. You know, you own the rights to your books. You go out and you do your book tours. You do your signings. You can do talks. You know, John Irving does a lot of talks whenever a book comes through and gets, you know, talking signature there. I don't know if Poe got all that. I don't know if he just made money from his short stories, because he didn't write novels. He wrote short stories.
Right.
And I don't know if I doubt that he did signings, because you know, how are you going to do a signing for short stories or in different publications? And was he hired to give talks at universities and lectures and stuff like that? I don't know.
No.
So I imagine because of that, he probably started pumping these stories out left, right, and center every time he had a bill to pay or rent was due or something.
Right.
Or to eat. And then he had a drug habit and alcohol habit, so that cost money. So he probably, you know, he had to pay for that. So
God, he must have been a miserable lifestyle.
Well, he's so dark. I mean, look at how he writes. I mean, how many authors? I mean, there's lots of, like the Bronte sisters of that time, and Mary Shelley and Bram Stoker. Well, he came later. But I mean, they're all dark novelists. I mean, they talk about creepy. It's Gothic. There's nothing bright and cheery about Heathcliff, carrying Catherine to the window the last time.
But when you look at their lives are all quite miserable. I mean, Stoker's life wasn't miserable. His life is totally different. Mary Shelley's life she was rich. She was an aristocrat. But if you look at the Brontes that you're mentioning, yeah, they had quite horrible lives. I mean, I don't think any of them
They died young.
Yeah. Cold and miserable and damp. So
Bram Stoker was tortured by his wife, which is probably why he has all that sexual repression in Dracula.
Well, she owned the rights to Dracula for years.
Yeah.
She prevented Universal from making that. I mean, Nosferatu, she got...
that's right.
She had something to do with some copyright infringement case against them.
And they were supposed to burn every single negative, but one negative remained, and that's why we still can see Nosferatu today, because everything was supposed to be destroyed, and someone didn't destroy their negative.
I love that movie, too. I think it's so well done for back then.
She was a vengeful bitch.
I think it's brilliant. I love that movie.
Florence. Her name was Florence.
Yeah.
So before we move on to Tomb of Ligeia, I think one little thing we can say about Ligeia is the Ligeia's theme of the death and resurrection of a beloved woman was subsequently developed by Alfred Hitchcock for the film Vertigo. So there's your Vertigo reference, Vicky.
Well, I knew it was in there somewhere, because that's like it's definitely, he was so obsessed with her. I thought it was really creepy how Jimmy Stewart kept dressing her up like his dead girlfriend or wife.
Well, he only did that at the end. I mean, not at the end, toward the end, because when he saw her in her regular guise, where she was just a 2-bit working girl, I guess you could call her.
Right.
He went after her and tracked her down, and she acted like she knew nothing about what he wanted from her. When in reality, she was the one that had been hired.
Damned him.
Right, and he didn't know this, but I think it was a piece of jewelry that she had that he recognized or whatever. And they ended up from there going back to that bell tower, and that's where it all happened again, where she died the second time. But what got me about Kim Novak is what the heck happened to her eyebrows in that movie? I mean, what is it with those eyebrows?
Yeah,
she was a beautiful woman, but whoever was doing the makeup didn't do a good job on her.
No, I thought the same thing. That's the first thing I noticed was eyebrows. Us women notice eyebrows, man. I'm telling you.
And that's it. They say that. And James Stewart, we covered Vertigo last year, and I remember James Stewart being a kind of a not unsettling performance, but kind of like
creepy, dirty old man.
Yeah, that's it.
Sleepy Joe.
It wasn't one of his everyman kind of roles, was it?
It just was. That role did not suit Jimmy Stewart, and it was so unnerving seeing him, because I thought he looked like a dirty old man, and and I think that's kind of something that's getting across here in Ligeia. Well, it gets even worse when we get into the movie, but.
So before we move
he became upset. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. So before we go into the movie, why don't we give our final thoughts of the book or the short story Ligeia? So, Rod, what's your final thoughts of Ligeia, the short story?
Well, I thought it was an interesting read. It was somewhat of a slog to go through because it's all one paragraph.
Yeah,
one gigantic paragraph, and the language he uses is very florid in some parts. And unless you're acquainted with that kind of language, it makes it very difficult to read, I think. But I did like it, and listening to the discussion, I still don't know what to come up with for, what happened in the book, in the story. It's not a very long story.
No.
What, 3 or 4 pages maybe?
Like a 9-minute read.
Yeah, I would say it went for like a 20-minute read if you can make it through the.
Well, he loses
language.
you. I like it. I like the story, but Poe kind of you got to go back and reread a little bit so you can catch yourself back up, because he loses you sometimes, especially with that.
Well, sometimes you lose it when you get to the end of the sentence and then your eyes go to the beginning of the next one, and will go up to the one that you just got finished reading, and it was like, okay, why does this keep happening? Where are the breaks for the paragraphs, but I liked it. It's not something I would read again, But I can see, and I don't know. Yeah, I can see why it would be made into a movie, why it would be inspiring a movie. But they had to pump it up, which is what they did.
Yeah.
You know.
What about yourself, Vicky? What are your final thoughts on the
I'm
short
kind
story?
of with Rod on that one. I kind of, if you don't read Poe or you didn't study him in high school, college, whatever, if he's just a different writer. Like we said in prior podcasts, he kind of drops you in the middle of a story. And it might not be, what's the word? I wanted closure. And you said it's just not a satisfying end of closure. That's probably what it is, because you really want to know more and you don't get anything else. But I mean, I love his story. So, I mean, that's not a problem at all. I mean, I like reading him because I like that time period for whatever strange reason. I'm just one of those weird people that likes reading that kind of stuff.
I mean, for myself, I read it. It's a story. I had to read it 3 times. I read it and then I read it before I went to bed, set it aside. The next night I read it before I went to bed, set it aside, and read it for the next day. And just to make sure.
You almost have to.
And what I do like about it, I don't know if it's not going to be one of these stories I'm going to revisit time and time again, but I like the dreamlike sequences for it. And after reading it after the 3rd time, there are parts of it that kind of haunt my subconscious about it. Right. There are fragments of it that really haunt me, which I quite like about it. But it wasn't an easy read, and it was kind of hard to. I don't know basically whether I'm just a hard-hearted son of a bitch. And so therefore, when it comes to this obsessive love sort of thing that I never actually experienced that for myself. So sometimes I found it kind of hard to relate to what's the story going on. But I did have a little bit of empathy, but I didn't really care.
Yeah.
But I liked the style, and I love Rowena. I love the image that I have of her in my head.
Right.
Rowena, I don't really remember her at all, which is kind of weird because she's in the second half of it. She fills just as much space as Ligeia.
She's overshadowed by Ligeia completely.
Precisely, which I thought, but maybe that's the fantasticness of the piece,
right?
Or maybe it's one of the downfalls of the piece. I'm not quite.
Maybe
not
blondes
quite sure.
Don't have more fun.
They do. They're not they are when they're not emanating Veronica. So, so that brings us to The Tomb of Ligeia. Now, The Tomb of Ligeia is a 1964 American international picture horror film produced in the UK by Alta Vista Productions. It's starring Vincent Price and Elizabeth Shepard. It tells the tale of a man haunted by the spirit of his dead wife and her effect on his second marriage. The screenplay was written by Robert Towne, who would go on to write Chinatown, which is quite interesting. It was based upon the short story Ligeia, which we just covered, by American author Edgar Allan Poe. The film was directed by Roger Corman and was the last in a series of 8 films loosely based on the work of Edgar Allan Poe. What's also interesting about Tomb of Ligeia, it was filmed at the Castle Acre Priory and other locations with a mostly English cast, and it was all filmed on location with no sets. It was all location shot. So what we're going to do before we go into our discussion of Tomb of Ligeia, we're going to cut to the trailer, and we'll be back right after the trailer.
Ligeia.
She will not die because she willed not to die.
Ligeia, the tale of terror Edgar Allan Poe thought his greatest. The masterfully macabre performance of Vincent Price together bring to life the undead, to haunt the living. What is the strange infatuation that draws a lady to the Stygian stranger who lives with his terrifying black cat in a castle of dark, somber mystery?
Seeing you and seeing her.
Yet when you thought I was Ligeia, you tried to attack me.
You must trust me. Give over your will to mine. No harm will come to you. Give over your will to mine.
The strangest love story ever told. making her life a nightmare of heart-stopping horror, such as few humans have ever survived.
Hello, welcome back to Literary License Podcast, and we're discussing The Tomb of Ligeia, the 1964 classic film by Roger Corman, starring Vincent Price. So, Rod, what are your thoughts about The Tomb of Ligeia?
Well, I actually remember seeing that movie at the cinema when I was a kid.
I knew you were going to say that.
I couldn't help it. We saw all the Edgar, but I will say that after The Conqueror Worm, which comes after this one, I believe.
Right.
I didn't see as many. The newer ones by Vincent Price with different directors just didn't do a thing for me. It had to be Roger Corman.
Right.
Yeah.
Although
I agree with
Michael
you on
Ripper
that.
was, Michael Ripper was good though. Is it Michael Ripper? No, it's not Michael Ripper. What is his name? The guy who directed Witchfinder General.
Oh, yeah. Winner.
Gosh.
Not the winner. It was, he committed suicide, didn't he, the guy who directed that?
Yeah, he did commit suicide. Well, anyway, that was the last one that I watched. So this one, I was eagerly looking forward to it because I love Mask of the Red Death. It had a great opening where they're in a cemetery, and they want to bury what's her name? Ligeia. I couldn't even think of her name there for a second. And it makes able use of the backgrounds. You know, it's a beautifully set up movie, and Vincent Price is playing obviously a younger man because his hair is pitch black. He wasn't supposed to
be. They wanted Richard Chamberlain for the part originally, and they put a lot of makeup on Vincent Price, if you noticed, to try to, young him down a little bit.
Yeah, youthify him. No facial hair that I can see. But I didn't find it as frightening or as stylish as the other ones that he did. My favorite one is not even a Vincent Price movie. It's The Premature Burial. That's my absolute favorite Poe.
Oh, my God.
Out of all of them.
About that one. Yeah, I'm up there with you.
I like Ray Milland as an actor. Not that I don't like Vincent Price. I love Vincent Price. But I just thought that they tried to make this into a horror movie. It's not really a horrifying story, and with a cat and everything.
How she turns into a cat. I was just talking to Keith prior podcasts and stuff about I didn't really notice the necrophilia, the mesmerism in it until, it's like, well, why does he got Ligeia in that bed? Was he doing with her body?
Right.
So, but Vincent Price, you can see him as being the creepy guy, whatever.
But what's quite interesting, I found, is that it's quite interesting that this film, then Vincent Price's next film would be Michael Reeves, is the person whose last name
Michael Reeves, yes.
And what's quite interesting is that it's quite interesting that he did this and then did Witchfinders General, because what we do get from this film, and I think there's the reason why the film, for me, it doesn't stand out like some of the other films, that we get a more naturalized Vincent Price. We don't get the overacting Vincent Price that we're so used to in the other films.
He's pretty chill in this movie, but he's so pathetic, though.
But I'm saying it's more naturalized acting, which of course now when you see Witchfinder General, I mean, he tones it down even more for that and becomes even more sinister. So we get this so we don't get like a camp Vincent Price. We get kind of this naturalistic, which is kind of funny because now we're actually for the first time dealing in a Roger Corman Poe film that's in a naturalistic setting. There's no, it's not fake sets and not fake stairways and fake rooms and fake everything. Now we're like, everything's there. It's all natural, which is quite interesting. But at the same time, it does take away from from some of the old Poe classics that we've seen. It does.
But his glasses, one minute he can wear them and the next minute he can't. And where can I get a pair of those? I absolutely love those glasses. I want a pair of them freaking glasses.
Well, I think we also see for 1964 also, I mean, this film came out in 1964, but we do get this 1968 hippie vibe coming through the film, which is kind of bizarre. Like with the glasses, you can see like hippies walking around with their hippie gear, where they were in those glasses. You know, and you kind of get this kind of evil thing. I mean, this thing coming through. And I think it's very, very clever that we have Elizabeth Shepard play Rowena and Ligeia, the same actress playing both. And I thought that was very clever. But she doesn't have that much charisma. She's pretty, but I didn't really, I mean, we got some, this is probably out of cinematography as far as Roger Corman's cinematography is going. This is probably one of the most beautiful way that this film is beautifully filmed. It is beautifully filmed. But I think we're missing a lot of these fantastic character actors that we would normally get in these kind of films. And so and everyone's okay, but no one's excellent. No, there's I mean, none of these actors. I was like, I've seen them before, but they weren't outstanding. There wasn't any, Mask of the Red Death. We had like color and brightness and everything, and we had like, we had the guy in his sexy little, tights running around trying to save the woman. And we had Jane Asher, and we had Vincent Price, and then we had the Satanic Woman. And then we had the Pit and the Pendulum, where it's basically like everything looks a bit exciting and everything's like, colorful. And here's everything's kind of natural, and everything's kind of like, and everyone's acting probably more natural. It's like we kind of gone from Hollywood school of filmmaking, and now we're going into the Stravinsky school of acting. It's like you need to feel the piece. You need to be the character. And that's what this kind of felt like, which kind of left me a bit
going for the
flat.
Supernatural possession and post-hypnotic suggestion, I guess. But the one part of the movie that I found creepy and was kind of like fit into the horror genre is when they're burying Ligeia, because they used to bury them with those glass things, the glass and things. I've dug them
and she
up
opens her eyes.
On digs in New England a couple times, and they were still there. But I just found that really scary. But her eyes opened up, and he said, "What did he say? What was the excuse? Or nerves? It was a nerve?"
Yeah. Well, your eyes do flip open.
Well, they had dropped the coffin. They dropped it a little bit. Right. But when she opened her eyes and he opened the thing to close them, she had eyeshadow and fake eyelashes on, very clearly seen.
She was really done up. I want to look that good when I go. Somebody better freaking make me up, friggin' fake eyelashes and shit like that.
When you die, I'm gonna get a drag queen do your hair and makeup.
I won't notice. I don't think I'll give a shit, Keith. But I would.
You know who she looked like though? Who she looked like when she was in the coffin?
Barbara
and
Steele.
She opened her eyes. The actress that was in Plague of the Zombies, who rose from the dead as a zombie.
Oh, yeah.
What was her name? Jacqueline Pierce.
Yeah. I think
her. She played the reptile as well for Hammer. And that's what she reminded me of. Now, Elizabeth Shepard.
What about her?
Elizabeth Shepard is the actress that was attacked by a crow in Damien Omen 2.
Oh, yeah.
Well, she was better in that than she was in this, so... I remember her more in that. It's funny, but when she's Rowena, it's like there's certain things I can remember, like reflecting back. And I saw this movie 2 days ago, and there's a lot of this movie that has not really resonated with me. But there's certain scenes, like what you said there, the black cat. I think the black cat part of it has actually made it more interesting. And then there was when Rowena arrives in her red dress and she's on horseback going across the abbey, and I thought that was quite good.
He just magically falls attractive there.
But the only thing I do think that I don't think this is Elizabeth Shepard's fault, but I think that they needed someone a bit more charismatic, because the thing is, like, you need to be. I think if you're going to play the part of Ligeia, there needs to be something freaking special about you, something that's extraordinary special about you to play this role. And I don't think Elizabeth Shepard's, she's an okay actress, there's nothing wrong, but there's nothing extremely special about the way she looks, about anything. Where I think if they got Barbara Steele to play that part, I think we'd be seeing a totally different movie. We'd be like, oh my God, because there'll be those eyes, those expressive eyes, and there'll be the steelness of it, and she can do that. Where Elizabeth Shepard's kind of like, she's okay. That's it. She's okay.
Wasn't Elizabeth Shepard actually hired to be the first Emma Peel?
Yeah, but Diana Rigg did a hell of a better job, so we're
Yeah,
lucky that
she
we
was
got
let
that
go.
early. Even if we got Diana Rigg to play Ligeia, I could see it. Yeah,
Huh.
I mean, if you think of the best thing that Elizabeth Shepard did was play in a bad sequel when she gets attacked by crows, and that's all you remember her by. Obviously, she didn't have a winning.
She was in The Legacy as well. I remember seeing her in that movie because she always wears wigs. She always wears wigs in her movies, and her hair is very fine. So whenever she has long hair, it's usually fake.
Well, Vincent Price was supposed to be a character was like supposed to be 25 to 30 years old. That's why he preferred Richard Chamberlain. And Towne said in the film, he thought the film got a little dull. He thinks it would have been better if the man didn't look like a necrophiliac to begin with. And he likes Vincent Price, but he just didn't think that he should have been in the movie. But
The worst thing about that is that Robert Towne discussed his distaste for Vincent Price being in the film because, as you said, he wanted Robert Chamberlain. So he was discussing it with the makeup person. No, he was discussing it with Roger Corman, and Roger Corman told him, "Don't worry about it because we got Marlene Dietrich on makeup artist."
Yeah,
real bitchy.
What was that about Marlene Dietrich?
He goes, I think he's too old. And then Roger Corman goes, "Don't worry, we have Marlene Dietrich's makeup artist, and you can make her look good. Don't worry, you can make Vincent look good."
I don't know. I thought he did a good job, though. I mean, Vincent Price, he's just one of those guys. He's never going to be an Oscar-winning Academy performance actor, and he embraces his, craft, and he just accepts it for what it is. Mm-hmm. And he just tries to give it hell no matter what. And that's why I like him so much in some of these movies.
Yeah, I mean, I can watch Vincent. I mean, Vincent Price could be taking a bath and eating soup, and I'd watch it and find it fascinating. I mean, it's only because he's just one of these people that your eyes drawn to him, no matter what he's doing. There could be all this action in front of him, and he could just be walking across the background, and your eyes are just drawn to him. He's one of these actors, and I do think, and I don't think the performance of Vincent Price is bad in this film. I think he does a really, really good job of what he's given. And I do think that this probably has some of the best lines for any of these Poe films, because I think Robert Towne did a really good job of adapting it. But I do think that, whenever you look at a Vincent Price film, and no matter what film it is, whether it's Dragon Wick or whether it's, before he went into horror, and even up and through his whole horror career, and even the stuff that he did before he died, you can tell that he has this delight of playing off the characters and the actors around him. And the more lifelike and the more fun that the character actors are, the more life that Vincent Price gives to you. And I think that the problem with this film is the casting around Vincent Price is not that exciting. They're okay actors.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
But I can't. If I close my eyes right now, I can picture Vincent Price. I can picture Ligeia in the coffin, and I can have a little bit of a glimpse of Rowena, but who's actually the same actress. But at the end of the day, I can't remember any of the other character actors. Where if you give me all the films that we've done up to now, even when we've done Telltale and the modernized versions of different Poe stories, I can give you what each of the characters look like and how much of all the other backing characters there are. Mask of the Red Death, I can pretty much describe almost everyone in that whole party scene, even the ones that don't even have don't even have lines.
Right.
And I can do that in the Pit and the Pendulum. I can tell you what everyone looked like and what everyone's doing and stuff like this. Here, I can remember Vincent Price, but I don't. Everyone else is kind of like background.
Can't forget the creepy cat that claws his eyes out.
Well, when the cat steals the movie, you have a problem.
Creepy cat.
What gets me is when they come in with the dead corpse of the fox. It looks nothing like the fox they were chasing.
Oh, I know. It looked like someone took it off a coat hanger.
Yeah, some old stole somebody had from the I Love Lucy or something.
Two little bank head was walking by and she dropped it.
Right. Thinking back to when this movie first came out, which was when 1964, somewhere around there.
I believe so.
I would say that the audience for this movie was well tuned into what to expect from a Vincent Price, Edgar Allan Poe, Roger Corman movie. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't deliver it, in my opinion. It's a different kind. It's more like a case study of him as this man who wants who was destroyed by the death of his wife, and this other woman that he marries has an attraction to.
Well, if he'd have just stayed away from the house in the movie, he probably could have been happy, because his problem really, he seemed really happy with his new blonde wife, Rowena or whatever. But when he went back, it's when all the bad stuff started happening. They were fine on their honeymoon. He probably should have stayed gone.
Well, I also think that if they did an Alfred Hitchcock with the backing actors, and I don't know, throw a Hurd in it, or some of these classic, fantastic character actors that England had, at that time, put Alex Guinness somewhere or whatever, but you know what I mean? You had like all these fantastic character actors in England at that time that would have filled out playing these parts really, really well. And so therefore I think, and then at least you would have a script that's being delivered. But I do think it has to be like, okay, we're going to be naturalized. We're doing everything in the natural. We're going to like film on a real abbey. So therefore our acting has to be natural. And I think, and what you get is you kind of get a film that's very beautiful to look at. It's quite interesting the way it's filmed, but yeah, I have to go with the character actors. I just wish that there was something for Price to play off of. There's no one for Price to pay off of.
I tend to agree with you on that.
No, there isn't. And also, for an abbey that's abandoned and they all live there, or he lives there, it seems quite well lit. I mean, it's got just candles for an illumination, but obviously that everybody is illuminated just like they're under lights. We all know that that's true, obviously, but they don't make any attempt to show any shading on the.
No, they didn't, did they?
No, they don't. I mean, they did that in a lot of other movies. Think of House of Usher, especially.
Right.
They did that, and that's when they were just starting out and not knowing what they were doing. That had one of those dream sequences that you were talking about with the corners all Vaselined out, different colors and smoke and stuff. It was very effective. I personally didn't. I liked it. Like, this reminds me of Dragonwyck a lot. I mean, when I saw Dragonwyck, I didn't know what to expect, and it was a precursor to these Poe films. I thought it was very similar to it. A tragic hero who's actually a murderer, which has. I don't want to give away the plot, but isn't it flowers that kill? It's almost like
what was the deal with the flowers? He had flowers all over her grave.
Oleander. He had oleander. He had
Oleander's white, though, mostly. Weren't these red?
It was something that he had killed his wife, who was a boorish, wealthy woman. Isn't that what it was? And he had inherited all her money. And then later on...
Dragonwyck or Ligeia?
Oh, was that Dragonwyck? Okay.
Dragonwyck is very similar to this Tomb of Ligeia.
Yeah.
In the sense that he married a servant girl and tried to make her into a lady, and then he tries to murder her. And I can't remember why he tried to murder her, but he had put flowers in her room, and the doctor found out about it.
Well, I mean, that was Dragonwyck came out at the same time as like Gaslight and all those kind of films are out. The Spiral Staircase and that sort of thing. So there was always a reason like to gaslight.
I mean, if you want to know about something sad, the man who was the doctor, if my memory serves me right, was a 20th Century Fox contractee, and then he went on and played the Amazing Colossal Man for AIP.
Oh my God, I forgot about that movie.
Glenn Langan was his name. He was in the Snake Pit and all kinds of movies like that.
Glenn or Glenda?
Oh, Snake Pit's brilliant.
Glenn or Glenda. Oh, there was a very startling scene in Tomb of Ligeia when she comes into the abbey and she's outlined against a stained glass window. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. It was fiery looking.
Well, there's some great cinematography in this film. I will give this credit for the cinematography. There's some, and the way they filmed it with the, I have it in widescreen and Blu-ray because it's part of my Vincent Price collection. And it looks very beautiful, and
I can imagine.
So what you're saying is, there's some very beautiful sequences in it. And there's some very stunning waves, but you do have a cast that basically is like the trees inside the staff that they don't really do much. They're nice to look at. Yeah.
But would you call this a horror film? Seriously, would you call it? I mean, think about
I think that the end, like where, he keeps his wife's dead body, what the hell was he doing with it for one? That's pretty horrific. But I mean, in the end, it's kind. I mean, if I was 5, it would probably scare me. A lot of it would go right over my head. But
you wouldn't think of the necrophilia part.
No, I didn't until I started researching it. But I mean, that's pretty much what was going on. I mean, I know some guys that are probably into that kind of thing, but.
Well, I have to say that what it did remind me of, really, it's kind of like, I could see, it's kind of, because the thing is, what's quite interesting is that when this opened in the 6th of December 1964 in the UK, it was double feature with Black Sabbath, Mario Bava's Black Sabbath, which is a fantastic
That movie scared
film.
Me. That movie scared the shit out of me.
And the thing is that they waited. This is kind of one of these weird cases where they basically released it in the UK first, and then they waited 2 months before they released it in the States.
It didn't do so hot over here in the beginning.
Well, I kind of wondering if they kind of knew that's what was going to happen with it, because I think what you have is a story that you have all the other Poe films up until this point, which they're playing to a matinee audience, which are mainly kids that really love these kind of films. And now all of a sudden it's like they switch gears. Okay, we're going to make you an adult horror film. And I got a feeling that the audience that would normally go with the Poe films probably wouldn't appreciate this, because it is like watching The Birds, and it's like, okay, now we're going to watch Vertigo.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where Vertigo's fine if you're an adult, but if you're a kid, it's like, I'm sorry.
No, you're not going to be entertained at all.
You know, so there was that kind of...
I wonder if it had to do with them suddenly being filmed in the UK rather than America. I mean, there is a difference in the way they look, and it's not just merely the backgrounds. There's something, you look at Mask of the Red Death, and this one, and Conqueror Worm, or that's how we knew it, as Witchfinder General. You know, you look at something like that, they all have a look to them. Is it because it's more naturalistic? Perhaps. Because in all these other Edgar Allan Poe movies, like Pit and the Pendulum is a good one, so is House of Usher, so is Premature Burial. There's always a scene at the beginning where somebody is coming after a long journey to a house. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
And the house is either on a windswept cliff or a sea-swept cliff, or it's surrounded by fog and a bog and destroyed trees. The vegetation is all ruined. You don't see that necessarily in these movies.
No.
You see,
well, you do get like the castle and everything for Mask, but this.
But you know it's real. You know it's.
But the Abbey's not as. I mean, even though the Abbey should be damp and crumbling, and even though we do get the outside of it, it was kind of damp and graveling, it doesn't have the same effect as a soundstage, does it?
No.
Which is weird, because it should have more of an atmosphere, considering it is on a real Abbey that's fallen apart. I don't know.
Yeah.
Which is kind of bizarre.
Well, they go to Stonehenge too, don't they?
Yeah, they do got a little bit of that going on in there. But yeah, I do think. I mean, it's kind of an odd film. Like I think that if you look at Price's audience and who is going to see his movies, I think this doesn't hit the mark. Though it did lead to Witchfinder General, which is a brilliant film. You know, I think we're actually covering that next year, but it's an excellent film. But at the same time, that was rated an adult rating. That was rated like R when that movie came out, and it was rated 18 in this country, because it is quite, it is for an adult audience.
It was R in America as well.
Yeah, it was. I know that they cut it back a little bit to bring it. So where this film, I think that, this is kind of a G rating with PG themes in it.
Yeah.
And where, Witchfinder Generals, I mean, it's, the torture and everything like that's quite vivid, and the way he's talking, and it's quite a sadistic little film. So, but with this film, I think a problem basically is for Corman. I think that for Corman, yeah, as far as a director goes, he shows some fantastic growth as being a director for this film. But I do think it came at a price.
Vincent Price?
Vincent came out of Vincent Price. Saying that, though, I did appreciate watching this film more this time than I did when I was younger. When it used to come on when I was younger, I always felt a bit bored by it. I did find a little bit
I think
more.
I was too.
But saying that,
although I did notice,
loud.
Well, even then, I noticed that when they showed the cat running in shadow, that it didn't look like a cat at all. I don't know what the heck it looked like. It looked like some
Shadow
puppet that they were
Yeah.
using. It just seemed very odd, and dream sequences again with the wind blowing and the gowns, blowing in the wind, and I like that. But I can see I was 12 when I saw this, and I can imagine that I didn't like it. I did buy the comic though. I still have the comic book of this. Yeah, I did buy the comic of it because in those days, Vincent Price movies were events. But it's also safe to say that after this movie was released, the comic book company, which always did an adaptation of an Edgar Allan Poe movie with Price in it, never did another one after this one. They never did one for Conqueror Worm or Witchfinder General or for what are the other ones that they did? Cry the Banshee.
Yeah.
Which Cry the Banshee gets like I actually like that movie because there's a monster in it, but a lot of people don't like it. I like it.
I do think that I think Roger Corman was hoping this will be like his Alfred Hitchcock Vertigo moment, because I think when Vertigo hit, and it kind of set like this critical acceptance onto Hitchcock. Is like, oh my God, he's now a critical, emotional genius. It's not only are we getting great performances, but we're getting this psychological platform going across the screen and all its patchwork glory. And I think that Roger Corman, with this film, I think he was hoping for the same thing, that basically we're going to lend you to a lot of the psychologicalness that's going on in the background, and we're going to give you some realistic acting, but I don't think it kind of hits the height. Though saying that, I think Vincent Price does a fantastic job in this, actually. There's less hamming going on in it. There, less will know what Vincent Price is known for. And, not saying that his hamming is a bad thing, but there's more of a naturalistic tone to what he's doing. He's toned it down, and you get a fantastic performance from him. So I will give him that. And I think Roger Corman grew as a director, because you do see things that he does think there's things that are in this film that are a lot more complicated than what we're used to but I think that they might be slightly too complicated for the audience that they're looking for. Therefore some things don't play out as well. And that maybe he, instead of trying to be literal, I think that maybe he needed to be less literal in from what he was trying to get from this kind of film. I think if he was less literal and made it more artistic maybe, and give it more of an artistic flourish and a flair during some of the supernatural elements, and I think that it maybe would have played better. And a better leading lady, actually. I think that if he got Barbara Steele or Diana Rigg, who would end up working with Vincent Price later on, or someone that has so much sexual charisma that they're just oozing. Right. I mean, even Raquel Welch at this time, she wouldn't have been a great actress, but you saw Raquel Welch and you thought, that poor thing. She's not the greatest actress, but I can't keep my freaking eyes off her because she's freaking got something. And that's what he needed for the role. And I think it's the miscasting of Ligeia that actually puts this down. And nothing for Vincent Price to play off of. Vincent Price does fantastic when he's playing off other actors, and there's no one for him to play off of. And everyone's taking everything very, very fucking serious as well.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So for no further ado, let's talk about how much we love this film. So what are your final thoughts of this film, Vicky?
Well, I have to agree with you. He didn't really have, I'm not going to deliberately go watch it again. I'll tell you that. I enjoyed it, but I didn't enjoy it. It's like something like, what were you giving me grief about watching Last of the Mohicans with Daniel Lewis-Day or whatever last week? Yeah, Daniel Day-Lewis, because I love that movie, and it's just got everything in it. But this one didn't hit me like that. It didn't. There was no Uncas in this movie.
Yeah.
No Uncas.
What about yourself, Rod? What are your final thoughts?
Well, like Vicky, it's not a movie that I would see again. I don't find the characters particularly interesting. I like Vincent Price. I think has done better than this.
Just don't get vested with this one for some reason.
Yeah, it just doesn't. I think because it came at the tail end. But I think if this came at the beginning, let's say, and it was the first one, I think even then it would be a failure overall, because it's just. I mean, when you think, what is the target audience for this? A 12-year-old girl and boy, basically.
Yeah.
So they really go beyond what's expected of them. They're writing for adults, but really these are children.
Exactly.
Who are, their attention span even then in 1964 wasn't very long. So it's got to be something, there's got to be a big payoff. And I think even with the big payoff of the Inferno and the cat attacking and all that stuff, wasn't enough. It wasn't, especially the Inferno, because how many times have there been Infernos?
Yeah.
For Edgar Allan Poe movies. So I would say, as far as Roger Corman, it shows him developing as a director where he's more competent. But I like the old Roger Corman too.
Right.
I like the Roger Corman of Attack of the Crab Monsters. I like that Roger Corman as well.
Little Shop of Horrors and all the other stuff.
Oh yeah, I like all that stuff. I enjoy. And Premature Burial, I don't know if you're ever going to do that, but that's really a stylish movie.
Yeah, we're covering that later on this year. So. Yeah.
Oh, good.
So we are covering
2020 looks big. So that's what I think.
Roaring 20s for the podcast.
So for myself, actually, I do appreciate where they were trying to go with this, but I do think with a little bit more of Ligeia while she was alive, to give you more understanding and find out what the love and relationship is between them, then have her die and then bring Rowena in, I think would have helped a little bit. But I do think that I do appreciate what Corman was trying to do. I love the scope. I love the setting. I love the way that it's filmed. But I think everyone is terribly miscast in it. I think Vincent Price, though we do get a naturalized acting, which I think he does pull off, that I think that if you're a Vincent Price fan, Vincent Price fan, that I think this is a film that you should see just to pique your interest about there's different kinds of acting styles. So it's great for that as a curiosity piece, but I don't think it's going to set your world on fire. And if it does set your world on fire, please email us at info@llpodcast.com and please let us know, because I think I missed out on it. So. So that brings us to the end of Ligeia by Edgar Allan Poe and The Tomb of Ligeia, the 1964 Roger Corman film starring Vincent Price. Next month, we'll be doing Brian De Palma's Obsession and Park Chan-wook's film Stoker, starring Nicole Kidman and Mia Wasilewski. And I'm sure I just mispronounced her name horribly wrong, but she's been up for a number of awards. So if you have any questions about if you can tell us how to pronounce her name, please send us an audio file to info@llpodcast.com so we can get it right next week. So make sure that you do join up with us at www.llpodcast.com to join up to our subscriber newsletter, which you get a newsletter out every month. And of course, if you are a subscriber to the newsletter, we got some special competitions coming up starting in February 2020. Our first giveaway, which will have 10 Edgar Allan Poe dolls that we'll be giving away, one for every month up until we start season 4. Then, of course, in season 4, we got plenty of Rocky and Bullwinkle and Bewitched, which will come back to you back in August 2020 and let you know what's going on for our new season 4. But sign up, and only subscribers will be eligible to win one of these products that we got coming to us. Thanking you from Funky Pop Vinyl Dolls. Of course, you can follow us on our social media, which is located on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and of course, you can follow us on Pinterest as well if you want to look at some fantastic, unique pictures from all the films and television series that we'll be covering. Of course, you can also listen to us on your favorite platforms, which include YouTube, Spreaker, Podbean, TuneIn Radio, iTunes, Spotify, and thank you, Spotify, for making us number 29 on the year, 26 of the year. Thank you for 2019. And of course, you can also follow us on Cash In Radio, Cashbox Radio, iHeartRadio as well. So it's good night for myself, and good night, Vicki.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Rob.
Good night, everybody.
Have a happy new year, and we will see you next week with Brian De Palma's Obsession and Park Chan-wook's Stoker.
This has been a literary license podcast production. Good night.